Excited to have Clay Eels here today, because as many of you already know, because I've been talking about it for weeks, Clay and my husband, Greg and Karen, were on the staff of the Oregon Daily Emerald in 1970 and 71, and I think they're longer. But so, and I had not seen Clay until about an hour ago.
She looks just the same.
For 50 years.
Oh my goodness.
But so Clay has been a newspaper man for a long time. Worked, and you'll have to correct me because I'm just, this is off the top of my head. But I know that you also were on the staff of the Oregonian at one point, and the Corrales Gazette-Times, and then also has worked with Fred Hutch. But eventually came back to Seattle, where he was originally from, and graduated from Mercer Island High School, and now lives in West Seattle. And the reason that he's here is because I absolutely couldn't stand him not coming. But also, I really wanted him to, I wanted you to, you've probably seen his articles that are in the Pacific Northwest magazine every Sunday in the Seattle Times. You know, the back of this, the very back of these wonderful articles about Seattle then and now, and so, or now and then, I guess. And he has a presentation to share with us, and I'm really delighted to have you meet him as well. Let's see. When I knew Clay, he was 19 years old. Now we're both in our 70s, so anyway, welcome, and I'll turn it over to Clay. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen.
Yay, glad to have you.
Thanks all of you for coming. Appreciate it. How many of you read the Seattle Times and read the Seattle Times Sunday magazine? All right. So this will be fun for you, because what I call this, and we've done presentations before. I say we, my column partner Gene Sherrard and I. We call this the insider's look. So this is like a cook's tour, okay? So when you read this, you will have a lot, you know, after another hour or so, you'll have a lot more insight about how this thing is put together and why it's put together the way it is. So I'm really glad that you're here. I think you will enjoy this. Most of you raised your hands. And it is, it's very gratifying to know that people are still reading the newspaper. My little lecture about, yes?
That's the only reason to read the Sunday paper.
That's the reason.
That's the only thing I look at in the magazine.
Can I quote you?
Yes,
indeed. If you didn't hear him, he said it's the only reason to read the newspaper. The now and then. The Sunday paper. It's a bite-sized thing. I'll get into this, but a lot of people say they like it because it's so short. And as Janet says, I go way back in print. In fact, when I die and they cut me open, I don't think there's going to be any blood coming out. It's all black ink. I've been doing publications for a long time. Even when I was this tall, I did a little neighborhood newsletter or newspaper when I grew up. But I couldn't figure out a way to do the comics other than cutting them out of the PI and pasting them in. So everybody got a different comic. So I'm going to guide you through this, but first I want you to see, this is my column partner, Gene Sherrard. He and I have been friends for decades. And Gene generally takes the photos, and then he and I switch every week. But I wanted you to see this photo. This is a scan of a photo from the Oregonian from 1970.
Wow.
And Janet's husband, Grattan, is standing above us. This is in the student newspaper office. And I imagine you can find me there, sitting there typing at the typewriter. This is when,
about 12.
this is when they did a story on the student press in Oregon. And so I just wanted you to have some proof that Janet isn't lying, okay? And you know, the Emerald, I'm sure many of you have this experience, if not at a student newspaper, in some other pursuit in college years. I mean, I ate, drank, lived, slept, just spent every waking hour at the Emerald office, and I think that was really formative time for me. It really brought me into what my whole life was about, which is communications and you know, putting ink to paper, publications, writing, photography, and so that leads into this column. Now, some of you know who this guy is. This is Paul Dorpat. Paul, he started the column, and he started it 37 years, you know, excuse me, it's almost 40 years ago. He wrote it for 37 years. He came to Seattle from Spokane and other points east in his 20s, and then in his 30s he had a friend ask him to research the history of a building in Pioneer Square, and one thing led to another. He started finding out about the Denny regrade downtown. You know, where Belltown is, used to be a big hill. You can't imagine that today, but anyway, imagine this. He ended up, starting in January of 1982, he wrote 1,800 columns. 1,800 columns, one every week for 37 years. What have you done every week for 37 years? He became a legend. This is him on the cover of Pacific Northwest magazine about halfway into that run. And the concept of the column is a very simple one that he came up with. It's very simple, but it's also very profound. And it features an old photo, a photo from the past. Doesn't matter how far back. It could be 100 years, it could be 20 years, whatever. And then a modern photo taken from the same vantage point. So there's the then and the now. And the text describes that. And it brings out the stories and the changes there. And it gives readers of the Seattle Times, now imagine, you all raised your hands, you are among what the Times considers to be 300,000 pairs of eyes that read the Sunday paper. Now that's not 300,000 copies of the paper. They figure that each copy gets circulated to a couple, three more people in the family. But that's a lot of people that you reach every week with this column. And it gives the readers of the Times really an entertaining way and an informative way at the same time to explore the touchdowns of our city. How many here remember Emmett Watson?
Oh, yeah.
Preeminent newspaper columnist for the Times, and before that the PI. He worked on the Star. He's a local boyfriend, and he's no longer around. He's gone. But this quote I really like. He says that knowing about our history is like getting a sense of ourselves, a sense of the city, a feeling for its past, a curiosity about its origins, and a pride in its present. So the concept of this column is not unusual. You know, people do then and now photos all the time. You know, Paul didn't invent it. But we believe that there is no other columnist in the country who did it so consistently for so long. We think it's unique in the country, and his legacy is enormous. There are people who, well, I'll just say it straight out. I think there's nobody else you can point to who is more responsible for popularizing local history than Paul Dorpat with these bite-sized columns. People love it. Now, Jean and I have been friends with Paul for nearly 4 decades, and I've helped with the writing and photography of some of his columns, and for the past 15 years, Jean has shot most of the now photos. As Paul got older, he kind of shrank into his basement and didn't go out nearly as much, and so Jean was sort of his face out there shooting the now photos. And both Jean and I have backgrounds in local journalism and heritage, and I mean, one of the things that has really informed my life the last, well, gosh, it's going on 40 years, is West Seattle history. Jana mentioned I'm from West Seattle. My mom was born and raised in West Seattle, so I have some street cred. And I became president of the Historical Society, and For 5 years, I was executive director of the Historical Society, and we did a lot of great stuff. Anyway, Jean and I both have backgrounds in these areas, and so when Paul, who's nearly 83 now, and he's settling into life in assisted living down at the Pike Place Market in a place called Heritage House on Western Avenue, just across from the market.
Oh.
When he decided to bid farewell to his readers a couple of years ago, we were honored to be his heirs apparent and to continue his legacy. And all of us are fortunate that the Times is committed to continuing the column without Paul. You know, they didn't have to do it. Paul was just a freelancer, and we're just freelancers. And as you've probably seen, newspapers are shrinking. You know, they don't have to do this. But reaching the Times audience is especially important now. And I had a chance to talk to a number of, I'll get you in a sec, I had a chance to talk to a number of people for the book I'm going to tell you about. And one of them is Tom Douglas. Does that ring a bell? The restaurateur?
Yeah.
He says, Seattle is morphing with dizzying speed into its future self. Any of us feel that way?
Oh, yeah.
Things are changing faster than we want them to be. And so Jean and I decided to take on this quest by breathing some new life into Paul's values for now and then. And so in this talk, I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes look. Your question?
Well, when we were talking about West Seattle, it made me think of Knut Berger.
Yes,
who
Knut
is
is
on
a...
ACTS, and he also has something that I bookmarked that I watch on my computer, and he talks about history.
It's called Mossback.
Yes.
Yes.
Knut Berger is a wonderful character. He's got these big
Oh,
full
yeah,
beard,
I've
and
seen him on
he's
PBS,
like
yeah.
he's like an everyday Santa Claus look of a guy, and he's
Channel
very
9 as
Channel
well.
9.
in Channel 9, and he's funny, and
Yeah.
he's online, and he's on TV, and he's a great local historian. He writes for Crosscut.
Yeah.
That's what I have.
And
bookmarked.
he's one of the people, you know, when you get into this history stuff, there's a community of people, you get to know them real fast.
I think he has 3 or 4 generations in his family that are Seattleites.
That's right.
Before him.
You're absolutely right. Now, the now and then column, it all starts with a great then photo. Can't write a good column. People say, oh, why don't you write about this? Okay, but what's the photo? We need to start with the photo. And you might think that Paul in all that time would have exhausted the supply of all the great thens, but the truth is that the supply is literally endless. And you may even have some in your drawers back in your room. Who knows? They can come from anywhere. And column ideas come from all over. Some of them come from key collectors. Some of them come from local heritage groups, and we especially try to aim the columns to local events and exhibits and book launches. And being open to seeking good then photos is especially important now, because you may have read that Paul, his massive archive, which I counted all of the items in it 2.5 years ago in his basement in Wallingford, 310,000. 310,000 photos, negatives, slides, glass negatives, videos, you name it, about Seattle history, all in his basement. You may have read, they're all at Seattle Public Library now. He donated them to the library because he thinks it's the common good. You know, some other repositories, whom I won't name right now, that will charge you for getting prints or copies or whatever, but the Seattle Public Library is ours. It's free because we all support it with our taxes and so and contributions. So it's at the library, but we can't get his stuff when it's at the library. They haven't cataloged it yet. It's going to take a while. And so it's really important to find the thens. Here's some examples of thens that came from individuals who contacted us. This is the Bothell Historical Society and their Main Street, and you can see the then and now. And then this is a woman who just wrote a book on the Duwamish River, B.J. Cummings. And this is from 1891, and that's the scene down underneath it, and B.J. is on the left of the now photo.
What was the one on the previous page? With
The
flowers?
previous page is something we hit a lot, and that's the Seattle fire.
Ah, okay.
And that
This
one
is why I
thing.
wanted you to get close so you could see better. And there are some classic photos of the Seattle fire. People don't realize that was the most devastating thing in Seattle history, and it wiped out the whole downtown.
What was the
It
date?
had to be rebuilt, 1889.
Wow. 89.
That's the year we got our statehood.
That's right. That's
Oh.
right. You're good. You're good. So a key element of this column is that we, there are great photos, then photos, but we got to be able to repeat them.
Mhm.
We ought to be able to get to the same angle to show so that you can compare the two. And sometimes we have to be really imaginative. Here is a picture of Kiki Soblu, who's the daughter of Chief Seattle, who's on the right. And she's sitting down in the, what's called Post Alley at the Pike Place Market. You know, that steep brick thing that goes down.
Yes.
And it's a great then photo. Well, how do we replicate that? They've changed it quite a bit. One of the imaginative things we did was to make sure to get some of Chief Seattle's descendants to pose in the photo. So this is Seattle's great-great-great-great-grandson and great-great-great-granddaughter. And Mary Lou, you wouldn't believe it, she's 80 years old. Both of them be straight out of Hollywood casting. I mean, but we try to be creative and to be able to show the then and the now. Here's another one. We've just started to get into aerial photography. We rented a helicopter. Has any of you been up in a helicopter?
Yeah.
I'd never been up in a helicopter in my life. And last February we went up, I thought, oh, it's going to be shaky, noisy, and the pilot said, well, you can take off the door. Because you don't want to have the glare of the window in your photos. Most people do that. So, okay, we'll take off the door. And Gene's in front, and the pilot's in the front right, and I'm in the back, and I'm shooting video, and Gene's shooting stills. But it wasn't scary at all. I felt like I was floating on a cloud. I'd go up again in a second. It was only less than an hour, but we went all over the city. This is one of the ones that resulted, this was just about a month ago this came out, and this was a wonderful aerial photo. Look at this photo on the left. There's all of these boats in the harbor. You remember the Kalakala ferry, some of you, and others, and it looks like a busy harbor. This is in the middle of the Depression, but it's a fake. They had Photoshop back then too, and they put these boats in here to make it look like, they even put in Mount Baker fake.
Oh,
And this is the original photo that they worked with,
oh my God.
and we went up in the helicopter and replicated the same view. So they're imaginative. You can even do now and thens from the air. And sometimes you don't need to go up in a plane or a helicopter. This is East Seattle School on Mercer Island, the oldest school, the oldest historic building on the island. And there's a woman who tried to save it. It's now razed, bulldozed. They tore it down, and guess what? 8 big new houses are going to go in this place.
Oh, yeah.
But this was a year ago, and she organized a rally to get all of these people. And there was this great photo of these students outside doing exercises at the school. And so we had this group photo where they're all posing as if they're doing the exercise too. Gene Sherrard is a tall guy, but he also has a 25-foot pole that he puts his camera on top and then zooms it up, and so the pole can look down on a big crowd. Okay, generally the columns run, as you've seen, they run one full page, and because of that we limit the accompanying text. Like I said, bite size, we only have 430 words, and that's to make sure that the photos are big enough. And we often, though, are asking the Times to expand the layout to more than one page, and you'll see some examples here. They've been really good about that. This one on the left is the Mount Baker Tunnel, the old one, before they did the new one. And Gene put his camera up on top through a sunroof of a car to get the new one down here. And that was a scary tunnel. I remember when I was a kid, they had exits and entrances on the Mercer Island side. Boy, you better get off there fast or on there fast, or you're going to get into a wreck.
And going the other way?
Yes, yes. This is McGrath's. This is the only stoplight on I-90 that was left. The last one was in North Bend, and this is what you saw when you stopped at the stoplight. I'm going fast because I've got a lot to cover, and I hope you enjoyed these. We are bringing a lot of new approaches to the column. And one of them is to realize that people are online now. And the Times posts everything it prints online. And they not only print it online, but they print our Sunday column the Thursday before. There's this concept called Throwback Thursday. And so you can get a peek at what's going to come out in the Sunday paper if you go to the Seattle Times site on Thursday. And, you know, haunting us is the idea that soon there may not ever be a print Times. And, you know, if any of you traveled or talked to relatives or friends in other cities, we live in a bubble.
Yeah.
We have the Seattle Times here every day, a local family in charge of it. Many cities don't have a newspaper anymore. The Oregonian, which Grattan worked for, and then I had the job after Grattan to cover Eugene for the Oregonian. You know what, the Oregonian used to be bigger than the Times. It was the biggest paper in the Northwest. You know what it is now? It's a tabloid paper that comes out 4 days a week.
Oh my goodness.
You know, this is happening everywhere. So, you know, we have to realize that you know, things are changing, and we've got to be adapting to the online audience and anticipate it and write for it. And generally, they're not the people in this room. It's the younger audience. You know, they're not me. You know, it's the first thing I do is read the paper every morning, but that's not the future. And the other thing to anticipate is that we have a massive number of newcomers. Do you know we've had 100,000 new people in the last 10 years in Seattle? You know, welcome Amazon and all of the tech people. And so when we're writing the column, we can't assume that everybody kind of knows what things are. And so we have to pick topics that are introductory for the new people, because the new people want to get embedded in the area just like all of us, the rest of us do. You know, they want to feel like they're at home. And we can't write down to them like as if they already know it. And so this is an example. This was 2 Januaries ago. I did this. This is a postcard from around about the time of the World's Fair, which is kind of a skyline photo. And then the skyline today from the same vantage, taken from up in Magnolia. And I tried to do an introductory thing where I said, I've got this favorite game I play. Because I live in West Seattle, and we go to Hamilton Viewpoint, we look over at the city, and I say, what's your favorite building? So with a skyline, it's easy to ask anybody what's their favorite building. And I always have a ready answer for my own. I know each of you has an answer. But my favorite building is this one, the Terminal Sales Building. It's at First and Virginia, downtown. It's about 11 stories high. It's Art Deco. It's a city landmark. It's not the tallest building, but to me it's the most beautiful one, and it's also personally relevant because my dad came out here from Kentucky in 1947, worked up on the 10th floor as a manufacturer's rep, and my mom worked in a dishware shop on the first floor. And so it's the building without which I would not be possible. So, we're talking about newcomers, and we're also talking about having different voices. Gene and I alternate each week. This is one of Gene's. He did it on the old transit station downtown that morphed into Greyhound. And we try to tell personal stories. Like I just told you about the Terminal Sales Building. That was the lead of my skyline column there. And Gene talks in this column about how he would get on the Greyhound to go to school, you know, as a college student. So injecting yourself into the column may seem kind of strange. Isn't this a history column? But what it does is it allows each of you to identify with me and go on this journey, this history journey together, because any story that each of us tells is something that we can all relate to. It's called human interest. Now, we also bring a lot of strategies to the text. We conduct new interviews, and we consult online newspaper archives. Any of you have a Seattle Public Library card?
Oh.
You better. You go on the Seattle Public Library website for free, and you can see every newspaper of the Times and the PI going back to the turn of the 20th century.
Wow.
And you can search keywords. You enter a keyword, and even if it's a little 6-point type in a classified ad, it'll come up. Yeah, I swear, if you go there and you start searching, search your name, search a family name, search something. you'll be on there for hours, and you wouldn't think you would be.
That's the thing, you
That's
get
the
lost.
problem.
We've also put in anecdotes and wordplay and humor, and we really try to be pointed at times, and this is a good example of that. We had a flu epidemic here, more than 100 years ago. And this is a photo of a little kid. He's a newsboy, and he's standing in front of a closed movie theater downtown, and it says, "All theaters closed until further notice by order of the mayor." And so in the now, we wanted to get a person in there, and there were demonstrations, Black Lives Matter demonstrations while this was going on. So we've got somebody carrying a sign at the same time, and she's got a mask on. And basically, you see the headline, there's no covering up the message of this masked boy. So as columnists, we get to make points. I mean, these people who were not wearing masks before vaccines, I don't know what to do with them. Anyway, another example of pointedness, I referenced Amazon. This was a case where we thought, the Amazon spheres are so beautiful and different. We got to feature them, but that's starting with the now. Well, what about the then? King County, back in the 30s, was one of only 5 counties in the whole country that got a WPA grant. Everybody remember the WPA in the 30s, the Depression? Grant to not only to help their assessment of buildings by taking a picture of every standing building in the county. So they had paid people to go around in a car, lean out the window, click, and then they drive a little bit, click, drive a little bit, click. And so there are all these photos of buildings from 37 and 38 that were piling up. And then in the late 70s, the county everything went computerized, and they stopped doing that. Well, what did we do with 40 years of these archived photos? If a building changed, they came out and took another photo because they wanted to be able to prove that they were right in assessing your property. So we went to the assessor's office, and that's what the Amazon Spheres site looked like back in 1938. It was a car lot. And when I wrote this, I said, all these cars, actually, there was a 38 one, but this is a later one. What year is this? It even says in here, 1957. All of the cars kind of had these round tops. So I was saying, it's like we got the Amazon dome, and then we got the round top domes of the cars, everyone's individual dome. And then then you do this research. I just love this ad. This is from the same day that this photo was taken, and it's from the Seattle PI, and it's for Frederick and Nelson. Can you see this? It's the home of the future. And it's got this husband coming home in a Jetsons-like thing. This is 5 years before the Jetsons, and the wife is running to greet him at the door. What do you think it's advertising? It's advertising ladies' hose. The man of tomorrow flies his airplane when, this is not, I can't quite read it, but the gift that will bring her running to the door will be these beautiful round-the-clock superb shears. Women of every age will love them. Anyway. And so that looks like the Amazon dome, and it's right on the same day. And so we put that online with the column. I mean, we like to have fun with this stuff. So sometimes we create a puzzle. Now, somebody contacted me and said, I've got this photo of a big mural. This mural is like 8 feet tall, taller than any of us here on the left. And it was created by a company named Seuss and Smith down in Belltown at the turn of the century. And they know it was in the family because descendants of them are the ones that of Seuss and Smith contacted me, and we actually put them in here. But we wanted to find out where this ended up. And so we wrote a column about this mystery and asked our readers to say, do you recognize this? It was at the Fry Hotel downtown for a while, but where did it go? Finally, we learned that it's up in Alaska. It's in storage in Alaska, and right now you can't go see it because of the virus. But that makes it fun. Sometimes you get creative with what we call a panorama. You know what that means. This panorama is, these are women's suffrage women
Oh,
downtown at 2nd and Stewart. And so we thought, you know, because the anniversary of the 100th year of women getting to vote was coming, that we would do a now photo. And we called up the mayor's office and said, when can Jenny Durkin come down and pose? And then, once we got that in place, we contacted all of the other elected officials. We got city council members there, county, the sheriff, even Lorena Gonzalez, who's running for mayor now, she's here in purple and she's pregnant. And then the real genius thing Jean thought of was to call the League of Women Voters and ask them to turn out their troops. And so instead of having suffrage signs, and these are not signs, these are suffrage magazines, some of them are carrying voting signs from the League of Women Voters. And it made it great now and then. And the Times gave us 2 pages and they did it on the center spread. And the staple didn't even cut anybody off. It was great. As you can see, we try to get people in the photos because, I mean, I remember Janet will tell you that back in journalism school, this silly phrase that kids and dogs sell newspapers. Well, it's all about getting people's faces. And a lot of, you think of now and then columns about buildings. Well, buildings are kind of boring. You just stand there. But if there's some aspect of the story that involves a person these days, we get them and pose them in the photo. Jean did a story about the Trianon Ballroom. This is a great example here. This is out near where the Greyhound station was. And actually not quite so far. It's so far east. It's along 2nd, I think. No, 3rd Avenue. And he went on Facebook and asked people to show up if they would like to, you know, the Trianon Ballroom was the cool place where you went to take your girl and go to a dance. So he asked some people to come dance in the crosswalk in the now. This is Fall City. Many of you probably know this intersection. It's a 6-way intersection, kind of confusing in the snow. And for the now, I got the Fall City Historical Society out and the proprietor of the Roadhouse, which is featured in here as well. All roads lead to the Roadhouse. Some of you may remember the TV series Twin Peaks. It was filmed at the Roadhouse. So again, getting people into it. This is another just a building photo, but this is a landmark, and this is, oh come on, sometimes it's happened, the words just leave me. Where, oh, that's it. It's the synagogue called Biker Holim, and so there's a Jewish synagogue, but you know, people's, Biker Holim you call it? Okay. And people, groups of people generally move throughout a city sometimes. They used to be, a lot of Jews were in the Central District, but over time they moved south to the Seward Park area. And so this became a city landmark, and it's Langston Hughes Cultural Center. Well, it's nice to see this building, and it's largely the same. There's some differences, minor, but we got, these are original people who were bar and bat mitzvah at the synagogue. They're standing in front, and standing above and below, sitting below, are largely African American students who are putting on a play at the place. So we've got 2 groups of students, 2 groups of people in the same photo to illustrate how the building was used then and now. Jean came up with this one. We had this photo of downtown on the waterfront. Mark Twain came to town. And so, okay, that's great. It's a fun photo of Mark Twain. How do we do a now photo? Who do we put in it? Well, who's the modern day Mark Twain around here? Well, we thought the guy who comes closest is the guy who's been doing editorial cartoons for the PI and the Times for the past 40 years, David Horsey. You've got it. So he's even got the hat on and he looks like Mark. And then, you know, another building shot. This is Plymouth Church, the old one that doesn't exist anymore, and the new one. But we also made sure to include the pastor of it. So you can see people make it a lot more appealing. And at times, we you know, Paul has already done a column. You know, Paul is so funny. He will say, you know, well, you can't do that column on that. I already did that. Well, Paul, that was 1984. There are new people here. And even if the people who were here are still here, they won't remember whether you did it back then. But somehow how we get around that is that we do a new view on an old thing. You've seen aerial photos of the AYP, the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition. Our first World's Fair. It was held out at the Viaduct campus. And we try to hit that every year around June when the fair opened in 1909. But this was a different view. This is the AYP from a different view on the campus grounds. This is 15th Avenue going up in north and south. And this is all the UW campus. All these buildings but one hiding here were torn down. These were temporary buildings for the fair. And so we can do an old topic, we just got to do it a little differently, right? So we try to be timely with topics, you know, hitting holidays and themes. This was a perfect one. I bet this is like a JFK moment for people. People know where they were, what they were doing when JFK was assassinated. People also know where they were, what they were doing when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. I bet every one of you has a story. Well, this guy knows what he was doing, only he can't remember it. He was born the very minute that Armstrong stepped on the moon. And they gave him Neil Armstrong's name. He's Neil Armstrong Dial. This is the guy. And so we put him down at the Museum of Flight because we couldn't figure out what hospital room it was up in up north near Northgate. And then these are him as a teenager, and this is him with Neil Armstrong when he got to meet him when he came through town once. So you know you can hit an anniversary in an imaginative way. It's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's just holidays. This is of the Seattle Center. How many here went to the Seattle World's Fair? I mean, I was 11, I went there, well, this doesn't exist anymore, the flight to Mars, and so it's actually, where this was taken is inside the EMP, or now it's called MOPOPS, that thing that looks like a pile of dirty laundry that's right next to the Space Needle, you know? The Cultural Museum, right? I didn't make that up, somebody told me that. But the thing that I think is funny here, this is one of the curators of MOPOPS, and it's for Halloween, it's cute, you know, Flight to Mars, because it was scary. Look at these scary faces. And the thing I love about this, it's sort of an inside joke, is who does this look like, do you think? This is our column founder, Paul Dorpat. Baseball season was coming last year, but if you remember last year, they weren't going to play. They delayed the season. So do we still do it or not? You know, our magazine is prepared a month in advance. Our deadlines are 5 weeks out because it's a slick magazine. So we don't know what's going to happen. You know, we might get the rug pulled out from under us in that intervening month. But this was irresistible. This is out in Magnolia. You all know who Joe Dimaggio is, but you probably didn't know that he played a couple of games for the Fort Lawton team, which is the Discovery Park now. And here he is at Discovery Park. This guy is a researcher who figured out, by triangulating maps and other documents from World War II, the exact spot where Joe was standing. And in the same pose, and he's holding a Joe Dimaggio bat, and he's wearing a New York Yankees hat. Yeah.
Where in the park is that spot? Do you have any idea?
It's just about, yes, I was there. We walked in, there's an east-west street that's the southern boundary of the park, and it's about midway. I can't tell you, there's a gate, and then you walk in, I'd say about 500 feet. It's a grassy knoll. You can see the hill the hill kind of goes back where the grandstands are for the then photo. But you know, you just use your imagination to try to do what you can. And it's also an open secret that we post a lot of extra stuff on our website. We have a blog, pauldorpat.com. And this is what it looks like if you go there today. I just took a screenshot of it. And our column, this is the current column for University National Bank that is going to be printed. Today is Thursday, so it's going to be printed this Sunday. This is Jean's column. But I want you to see the homepage and to see the name of it, because any of you who has a computer, you can go there. And you see where I've written the arrow here? Just put your email address in there and hit subscribe, and every week you can get an update on our column for free. And it's not just the column, but we put lots of extra photos and videos and newspaper articles. And again, it's a lot of fun. We're trying to appeal to the online audience. Now I'm getting close here. I'm rounding third, heading for home. I know some of your, we're getting close to it. But I wanted to give you a little sneak peek. This is now you can't tell anybody but this is the column that is running 2 Sundays from now on the 26th. How many of you have been to the Horiuchi Mural at Seattle Center?
Oh, yeah.
This is right beneath the Space Needle. It's so gorgeous. And this is an example of the times, if you give them good stuff, they'll let you go big. And the impetus was for this, it's to tell the story of Paul Horiuchi, of course, who did the mural. But this little guy, back in 1965, he was 3 years old, his family came to visit the mural. He's the great nephew of Paul Horiuchi. And he organized a Seattle reunion of Horiuchis. And one of the relatives told me about it, and I contacted Brian. I said, "Can we come and do a group photo of your family?" And we would have done a straight-on repeat of this, and we did. They're all lined up, like a firing squad, And there's 15 of them, and it's okay, but it's kind of boring. And then Gene, there were 2 little girls. This is Brian, by the way. This guy is this guy, the little 3-year-old. This is him today. But there were a couple of little girls, and they started dancing. And Gene said, "Well, why don't you keep twirling around?" He got this girl twirling, and her shadow is pointing toward them, and the signature is here. It's off center, so it's not a direct now and then, but it's good enough. It was irresistible. And so you'll see that in this Sunday paper a couple Sundays from now. And the point I'm going to get to is that we do something really fun. I tried to save some of the best for last year. With the extras, we've started a feature, and we've been doing it, we've got about 80 of them now, or what are we called, 360-degree videos. And I don't know if any of you have seen a 360-degree video. It was new to me a couple of years ago. It's a video, the cameras are like a little black stick about this big, and you hold them up or put them on a pole, and it takes a video of everywhere around. 360 degrees. And then when you watch it online, you can take your mouse and put it into the screen and click on the screen and move it around, and you can see what's happening all around that scene. And so we have been shooting and posting 360 videos for the last 2 years of every column. And we let it run for 5 minutes, because that's about how long it takes to read the column. So again, if you go to pauldorpat.com, you find the link, and you click on it, and for 5 minutes you can hear Gene or I reading the column while you mouse around and you see the whole thing. We figure this is going to be a great resource for the future. And the one for this is really fun. And I'm going to show you the one that kicked it off. This is a screenshot. But anybody know where this is? Come on, shout it out.
Fairview Bridge?
No, not Fairview. This is the Viaduct.
Of course, the Viaduct.
My heart was kind of ripped out when that was ripped down. I mean, I know all the reasons for ripping it down, but that was West Seattle's lifeline to the rest of the city. And there was no better view of Seattle than right on the top of that. So let me show you something that I think you're going to like, and it's not going to be, I won't play you the whole thing, but I got to show you something. So this is coming from the south. Gene and I took one last ride on the Viaduct the day before it was closed. And I want to show you how this works. I'm not really good with this kind of mousing, but I'm going to, see? So see what I'm doing? I'm moving around. And you can see the side. It's like you're driving, but You can go all the way over here to West Seattle.
Wow, that's amazing.
You can even see Gene and me. There's Gene driving down there, and that's me on the right side holding the pole.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Well, I hope they're right.
Come on. Oh, I
That's
gotta do
somebody's
this again.
hat?
But, well, you've probably seen enough here, but let's go to the guts of it. I guess I gotta move this up. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. So here's the heart of downtown.
Wow.
Isn't this cool?
Yeah.
And you can mouse around and see anything you want in any direction. And you can see that every single week for every column we do. And it's free. You recognize everything here?
There's the wheel.
There's the wheel.
Yep.
You started far south.
We're coming up to my favorite building, Terminal Sales, pretty quick here. We had a lot of fun doing this, and we thought, well, we got to do this every week. You know, I mean, we're freelancers. We get paid peanuts. You know, a lot of it's just for the fun of it. There's Terminal Sales right there. See it?
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway,
Terminal sales is.
Terminal Sales building at First in Virginia.
How old is that building?
I believe it's 1921. I gotta look it up.
That's 100 years.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's pretty good.
And then we're about to go into the tunnel here. Remember the Battery Street Tunnel that doesn't exist anymore? So I'm going to go back to the presentation, and like I said, we try to save the best for last. And to me, the best is where we came from. This is Mr. Dorpat. We always try to invoke his humor. It's idiosyncratic, but you can catch it in the gleam in his eye. He's been a wonderful friend over the years, and he's a big teddy bear. I swear, he comes up to you, and his arms are like bear claws. And his voice is real down. Oh, boy. And he just befriended, he's like an instant friend. And if you're in the history community, you know Paul. Well, I want to tell you a story about him. There's a saga of how many of you have eaten at Ivar's Fish and Chips? Well,
I'm related to paper. Are you?
Oh my goodness.
this is about 11 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
You may have read about this in the
Yes.
paper. Don't give it away. Ivor died in the mid-'80s. He was a character. He was a showman. He was the ultimate promoter. He could advertise anything to make you smile about it. And he wrote songs, he played guitar, he was a ham. Well, he died, but Ivar's has carried on his tradition, and what they did about 11 years ago is they came up with this brilliant idea. They decided that Ivor was such a visionary that he thought mass transit was going to be underwater. And so he wanted to be ahead of the game. So he was going to, Ivor put underwater billboards advertising his chowder because he knew that the freeways were coming underwater and that people would see them. Now this is a hoax. But isn't it beautifully funny? And so they went out into Elliott Bay, just across from Duwamish Head. And they sank a billboard, and before they did, they made the billboard look all wrecked up, like it was, that the salt water had damaged it over the years. And then they had divers go out, and they had a film crew out on the boat. And the film crew filmed these divers pulling up, look what we've discovered, this billboard from Ivar's. And chowder is only 75 cents. And they were filming it for a TV commercial. It was delicious. Well, Paul, over the years, his number one subject of all that he loved is Ivor Hagelin. And he's still working on it, and maybe he'll finish it, a biography of Ivor. He's got thousands of pages that he's written about Ivor. We've all got these someday projects where people kid you about it. Are you ever going to get that done? Well, that's with Paul. When's that Ivor biography coming out? He loved Ivor. He knew Ivor. When the divers pulled up this billboard, a Seattle Times photographer, coincidentally, was driving around Duwamish Head and saw something going out there in the water and took some photos of this from the land. Got back to the newsroom and said, this is a story, I don't know what this is. And so they assigned it to a reporter, Eric Lasitas, and Eric did a story for the next day's paper with this photo. And, that Ivor was a visionary, and he put these billboards down there. And Eric was a longtime friend of Paul's, and actually launched Paul on the column back in 1982 when he wrote a couple of columns about Paul's history efforts. Called up Paul to say, Paul, is this true? Now, Paul knew it was a hoax, but he said, well, it could be, I don't know. It sounds like Ivor, and so it goes into the paper, right? So, oops is right. So a week later, the Times finds out that it's a hoax, and the editors are pissed, very angry, especially Eric Lasitas.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as he puts it, and still does to this day, when you talk about holding a grudge, he says, Paul lied to me. And in that second article that he wrote were several paragraphs quoting the editor of the Times saying that Paul Dorpat's job is on the line because anybody associated with the paper cannot be lying in public. He's a historian and people trust him. And Paul, and this is in the paper. This is, Paul didn't know this was going to come out. It's in the paper. It's saying his job is on the line, and it says, we're meeting with him on Tuesday. This was Saturday. Paul was livid, and he was also, doesn't the Times have a sense of humor? Yeah. If anybody's going to pull a hoax, it would be Ivor's, and my job's on the line. I'm going to quit. There's I don't need the Times anymore. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to quit. I'm going to sit in my basement. I'm going to finish my Ivor biography. And Gene and I, in person and on the phone, got into his face, and we said, Paul, you can't do that. You can't do that. If you drop out of your column, people's memories are short. People will forget about you. You have an avenue every single week to tell people about what you're doing. And at the bottom of the column it says, it promotes his latest book, whatever it is. And you can't do it. You have to apologize. Apologize? I'm not going to apologize. I'm going to apologize. I can't apologize. Paul, you have to apologize. And this, literally hours of conversation. I remember yelling at him on the phone. You have to apologize. And finally we got to the point where Paul said, all right, I'll apologize, but you have to write it. So I did. And a month later, he went into the meeting and he handed in the apology, and who knows what happened in the meeting. I don't think, Paul doesn't like to confront people. But here's his column a month later. Remember, the column has a month gestation period, sort of. And this is about the Queen Anne water tower. These are city officials testing the city water then, and then this is the water tower now. And here is the apology, an apology to readers about the Ivor thing. Boy, was that a bitter pill for him to swallow. And he said, and because you're making me apologize, you have to pose in the now photo. So, you gotta love the guy. He was never happy with the situation. And And Eric has never forgiven. I haven't been able to get Eric to talk to Paul. Anyway, this came into play last year when we decided, Gene and I thought, well, let's do an update on Paul's Ivor biography. And so we turned in a column. You can see the text is a little shorter on this because half of the column was about Ivor Hagelin. But the Times is so bitter still about that they cut out half the column. And this became more of a history of Paul. You can see Paul as a little boy, Paul at the Sky River Rock Festival that he invented back in '67, Paul with Murray Morgan, and then a current. We were down having fish and chips with him at Ivor's, where he's throwing fish and chips out to the. But you know, we've all got things in our life that we're still kind of bitter about. Man, it would be nice to get rid of those, wouldn't it? Just to have some forgiveness. Anyway, we are delighted to be doing this column. I know that you're not going to all write this down, but the fastest thing for you to do would be to go to pauldorkat.com if you want to contact either one of us. We just love doing this. We love carrying on his tradition, his legacy. And, you know, just remember every column begins with a great then. And this is my little, it's not even a sales pitch. It's not a sales pitch at all. You know, Paul, we knew that Paul was coming on the downside of it. And so Gene and I, particularly Gene was the financier of this. In 2018, we worked on this for 2 or 3 years. I was the editor of this book. This is the best of now and then. These are the best 100 now and thens. And every page has an old photo and a new photo. And if you can imagine, the column's been around. There's the Denny Regrade. The column's been around for almost 40 years. So some of the nows are thens. And Gene went out and shot every then anew back in 2017 and 2018. So these are relatively new, although, you know, the Viaduct, this Viaduct was still standing here, so we don't have a new one without the Viaduct. But this was a real labor of love, and it cost a ton of money. And we, well, I'll just be blunt. This came out in October of 2018 on Paul's 80th birthday in October. And it was printed in China, and because of Trump's bad relations with China, the books didn't come. And so our prime sales period, we lost it. For most of that time, we didn't have books in stores. We got them eventually, and they've sold well. This is a $50 book, $49.95 book. But we have a storage problem. Paying fees on a storage unit is no fun when the books aren't moving anymore. This is a 3-year-old book. So I have boxes of books here, and I'm happy to give one to every single one of you.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I'd be happy to sign it if you want. I was the editor. I wrote the intro to the book. My hands are all over it. I brought a little wicker basket if some of you are feeling sorry for us and you want to contribute something, but there's no obligation there. I'd much rather have it get into your hands. And that is the true end of my presentation. So thank you very much. I've been very happy. Are there any questions? Other than, when can I wake up? I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or talk with you afterward.
When you mentioned the Greyhound Bus Depot,
Yes.
were you talking about the 8th and Stewart one?
Yes.
Because I grew up in Kent and then lived in Seattle since I was 18 and was born in Seattle. But that's how we got back and forth from Kent. I was born in 42.
This was a multi-company transit center before it became Greyhound only.
Yeah.
So there were multiple lines coming through there early on. And it was a beautiful building.
But by the time I wrote
She's talking about the old Greyhound station.
Yeah, by the time I got, was writing in junior high and high school, it was a little bit scary.
Mhm.
But usually I was always with one of my friends.
Yeah, well, I'm right there with you. You know, I went to the University of Oregon in Eugene. in high school, you know, I was blinded in high school, politically so, and I was going to West Point. I had first alternate nominations from Jackson and Magnuson and the local congressman, and I was going, and then I went to tests in Fort Lewis, and everything was above average except for physical agility was just average, and that knocked me out. And as a backup, I had applied to the UW and the U of O journalism schools, and the UW never got back to me. I don't know why. And UW accepted me, or Oregon and Eugene accepted me, and that's how I got to Eugene. And I rode that Greyhound back up, and that 300 miles is a very familiar, you know, I think some of the ruts in the road are for me. And Greyhound was there. And remember they used to allow smoking on buses?
Yeah.
Holy hell. And then they had this thing where you could only smoke in the last 2 rows or something, which, you know, I've been a big non-smokers' rights advocate. Janet mentioned I worked at the Hutch for 13 years, publications that are there. There's a great phrase that how's it go? Having a non-smoking area in a restaurant is like having a non-urinating area in a swimming pool. It doesn't work. So imagine you're cooped up in a Greyhound bus with these people smoking. I mean, ugh. That was the sketchy part for me. You know, just one little sidelight. I gotta tell you, I was the president of the Association for Non-Smokers' Rights in 1975 and 76 in Eugene, Oregon, affiliated with the Lung Association. And we lobbied the legislature that year in Oregon, which Grattan served for many years afterwards. He was one of the majority leaders. But he wasn't there then, thank goodness.
Actually, he was.
Well, he was there, but he didn't prevail. And
No.
there were 2 bills we were lobbying for. Imagine this. We lobbied for bills to ban smoking in elevators and child care centers. And they both lost because the tobacco industry paid off the losses. I mean, anyway, that's a tangent, but it's you know, I've got a good 12 years. I'm a Seattle guy through and through, but I had a 12-year chunk in Oregon, and Greyhound was certainly a part of it.
The Greyhound bus depot in Camp was a wonderful place with a soda fountain.
Yes.
The man that sold tickets and was the soda jerk was a big guy. His name was Bubbins.
Bubbins,
I
yes.
still remember that. And one other little thing, I didn't live here at the time, but I've been told that Eric Lacitus' mother lived in Culver, Ravenna.
Good.
I don't know if that's true or not. But
Well, please don't give Eric a hard time about this. I'm just maybe I'm telling it out of school, but these things happen in journalism, you know.
Wasn't he the editor of the Daily when I was?
He could have been. I have a lot of respect for Eric because he's been around forever. I mean, who stays in a newspaper for 40 years? And he's still in the paper. He's still doing it. And his stories are always long and conversational. You can always tell an Eric story, even if his byline isn't on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
He was all for what I.
Well, come get a book.
I don't tell him much. I hate that name, Eric.
Could I have your attention for one? I promise, only 30 more seconds. When you're the student editor of the paper at the University of Oregon, at the end of the year, they give you a bound volume for that year. Grattan was editor in 70-71 when I worked for him. You saw the photo. Janet has his bound volume up here. My byline is all the way through it many times. But if you want to see anything from that era of 70, 71.
Historical. I mean, one of the things I just was turning the page is that Janis Joplin found dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But these were,
We covered bombings on campus.
yeah,
I mean, there are
I
all
was
kinds of
amazed
stuff.
that you got
Talk about the blinders coming off. Just go work for the student newspaper.
Anyway, so that was great. But yeah, I do have that, and I have it here forever. If you're ever interested in looking at it, look at it.
Well, I love that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Paul, Do you have a card or is there somewhere we can send a check if we take a book?
I'll give you a card, I have a few in my
Just
wallet.
don't have, thank you.
But there's no need, I mean, please know the greater good is to get them out of the storage unit.
I know,